Darcia Narvaez is a professor of psychology emerita at the University of Notre Dame. Raised as a bilingual, bicultural child, Darcia's early life experiences led her to the question why children thrived in some countries, but were undercared for and sickly in other countries, especially the richest countries in the world, the United States and the United Kingdom. Darcia's book, Neurobiology and the Development of Human Morality, Evolution, Culture, and Wisdom, was chosen for the Vatican's 2017 Expanded Reason Award from among more than 360 entries and 30 countries. You can find Darcia's work at the Evolved Nest Initiative online, and you can join live ongoing discussions about the Evolved Nest latest film project, Breaking the Cycle. Stay tuned after this interview to watch the 6-minute film.
All right, well, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be with you and in this conversation. Well, my childhood, half of it was spent outside the United States. Within the United States, I really didn't have any experience with breastfeeding that I remember. But when we lived in Mexico, Colombia, spent a month in Guatemala, I noticed mothers were carrying their children on their backs, tied up, and I actually bought shawls when I was a teen to bring home so I could do that when I became a mother. And, the breastfeeding right there, all very integrated way of growing a child. So I had glimpses of that. But I kind of tamped down that I had so many other interests and careers. It's only in the last 15 years, perhaps 20 years, that I became enlightened. And that happened because I found first James Prescott's work on looking at what creates societies that are not violent, peaceful societies. And he published, James Prescott was formerly of NIMH, and they used to have a child abuse prevention program when he was there in the 70s. And his study, he looked at over 400 societies around the world that the anthropologists had documented. And he found that 80% of the variation in whether society was peaceful or violent was due to breastfeeding and carrying a child. And I thought, whoa, what's going on there? And then I found the book Hunter-Gatherer Childhoods. And in there, they identified breastfeeding as one of several components that we now call the evolved nest. And in there were two shockers. One, they observed breastfeeding lasting from 2 to 8 years. It's like, whoa. And then that the average age of weaning was 4 years. It's like, oh, all right. So just exploding information. So then it was like, wow, why? What does it mean? And Melvin Connor, the anthropologist, said, these characteristics, the evolved nest, maybe they're important because they're all over the world. They've been here for, what, a couple millions of years. So I got intrigued. So I had to read neuroscience and had to go investigate why it's so important.
Were you surprised at some of the barriers to breastfeeding you encountered in that world of academia and science and research and then presenting the science?
Yes and no. No, because I think corporations have most of the power in the United States and they want to make money, and the US's institutions are all set up to support that. And so it's not about well-being, it's not about children and families. And so that's the non-surprise, and it's very distressing. And the United States is the only high-income country that really neglects children and families. It's just appalling when you look at it from the perspective of the world. But yes, I was also surprised because I have the crazy notion that if you give people information about how important this is for children's development, they'll change their behavior, they'll change their mind, they'll, believe you. But no, people will resist, oh, I've never heard that before, it can't be true. That's why misinformation works so well. When people hear the bad information over and over and over, they start to think it is true. And our society is filled with that kind of information, including about babies. They don't need that, they're resilient, right? Formula is just as good. And so we hear all that over and over and over. And in my world, academia now, It's difficult to even, bring up the fact that babies have particular needs. They'll grow into, well-functioning neurobiological creatures with good social skills and companionship, cooperative morality. If you give them this stuff, people, again, resist. And so we've had pushback from editors who say, oh, this can't be important. Or you can't write about breastfeeding. You can't write about infant circumcision. You're not a medical doctor. There's a lot of, and I write for Psychology Today, and there's pushback there as well. So a lot of lack of support, lack of belief in it. I mean, the Western culture is all about training this little intellectual mind, this ivory tower mind, as if that's what human nature is, what being human means. And that's crazy because we're destroying everything because of that mind is so isolated, not integrated with your heart and your intuitions. That is part of being a human being.
So this takes us to who's perceiving the message. At Kindred, we've always advocated for consumers, is what they would be called in the capitalist model, but for the family members themselves, mothers, fathers, parents, families, to get the information they need. But this sounds like there's going to be a piece of self-awareness necessary here, which is the left brain, right brain training we have in our culture to even perceive this information and to perceive it in an integrated way.
Yeah, so in my work, I talk about how what we've done to childhood is we've forced people into their survival systems, which is all the triggers, and you get, you automatically see threat and feel stressed, and you can't think when that happens. You can't feel, you can't be open, right? And we undercare for babies. So much so that's pretty normal. We think that's normal kind of personality to be like that, very self-oriented. And then we go send kids to school and we teach their left brain, this little intellectual way of thinking is, you create abstract models and then you apply them in the world and they have a script, but that's the normal way of interacting in the world. And what's missing is the heart, the sense of connection, the sense of intuition about how to get along, and all this millions of little things about how to get along because you were immersed in a cooperative society, a connected place where they loved you and you were welcomed. That's missing for most of our children's experiences, and most of the adults now in our country miss that too. And so they have these gaps, and for you to say something that doesn't fit with the script they've been taught is like, what? It triggers them, and then they can't hear. And so we have to heal people by encouraging, welcoming, but they also have to get in touch with their own hearts and their own feelings, their own intuitions, and begin to open up that cage, that fortress that they've built around their true selves. And it takes a little pain to do that. It takes a little humility, right, to let go. And then you actually, the therapists say, it's that you're so afraid of opening that gate, and then when you finally do it, yeah, there's some pain, but boy, you're free. You feel this great freedom. So we need to help people go through the grief of letting go of the things that they missed as babies, as young children, and reconnect to one another and build our communities together.
Kamari Bug said yesterday that the key to this strategy, this long-term strategy of breastfeeding advocacy, is community, and to focus on the oxytocin you get from that, like the oxytocin you get from bonding with babies and breastfeeding. So that's our fuel we can look forward to sustaining us through this transition that's individual, as you're saying, and collective. So you did this amazing work of integrating the science, and this is one of the problems that parents face when they are trying to use their left brain to navigate wellness. And somehow in our instincts, Joseph Chilton Pierce has called it the biocultural conflict, that we feel conflicted in trying to meet our children's biological imperatives in a culture that has other imperatives, and then to try to find a whole child wellness model to help us through this. This is what the evolved nest is. So can you tell me a little bit about the integration of the siloed science into the evolved nest?
Right. As I said, I discovered James Prescott, then I discovered the anthropologist, then I had to go into neuroscience, and I had to go into developmental neuroscience and clinical science for the outcomes of what, and then pull all those things together, plus other things, to realize that if you're going to build a well-functioning, happy, cooperative human being, you've got to pay attention to a whole bunch of things, and especially meeting the basic needs of babies, meeting the basic needs of mothers and babies, meeting the basic needs of children as they grow and change and need other kinds of support. And the evolved nest is about that. We all need to be nested throughout our lives. And so these components shift in what it exactly looks like. Um, but there are 9 components, and I don't know if you want me to go through them, but people can look that up, evolvednest.org. And I initially started writing about these things at my Psychology Today blog post, posting things. They've gotten resistant now because I think they get money from formula companies and crib companies, and they don't want to hear about, they banned talking about infant circumcision, for example, even though I have several posts up that have millions of hits. And then you discovered, we connected, Lisa, and you have helped put together Evolved Nest Initiative. EvolvedNest.org is part of Kindred World, Kindred Media, and that's been marvelous. So we are creating all sorts of tools for people to use in various ways.
So can you tell us about Breaking the Cycle, this little short film that's packed so much science into it, the integrated science and the evolved nest, and the language that you're using in there, that we're in a cycle of competitive detachment and we need to work back towards. And this piece, I found people are really amazed to discover 95% of our human history, we were a peaceful species. And we want to work back towards the cycle of cooperative companionship, which you show us a path is possible, but not without some awareness and some work. So can you tell us about this, which I again view as this lovely, creative, over, around, and under the barrier message?
Well, it comes out of my book, Neurobiology and the Development of Human Morality, Evolution, Culture, and Wisdom, which was published in 2014. And it's won a couple of major awards. And it's the book was kind of dense. I mean, it's really important and good stuff, but it's a lot to read, and so we came up with this idea to have something quick where people get the message. It's heart-centered. It touches you. I always cry when I watch it, no matter how many times I watch it. And it's intended to give you that holistic view, that early experience matters for shaping a good psychosocial neurobiology, which then leads to wellness, well-being, and actually wisdom in the adults who are supported in this way. And then that leads to a culture. They build a culture that meets basic needs, is flexibly attuned to one another and to the needs of children. And then that cycle keeps going. That's the cooperative companionship that used to be normal all over the world. And we've shifted and slipped into undercare for the young, where, we kind of minimize the needs of babies. They don't need, they're resilient, right? And let's get their burden off the parents, That's just been around for quite a long time, at least 150 years in the USA, getting worse sometimes in some places, sometimes better. And then that leads to a poorly functioning neurobiology and sociality and morality. You're dysregulated in so many different ways. Your immune system, your endocrine system, your oxytocin system doesn't work very well, depending on when that neglect or undercare occurred. And then the adults are kind of sickly and not well and don't get along that well and kind of ornery and oppositional, or they're withdrawn. And then they create the culture that continues the cycle. They're overwhelmed or over controlling or under controlling and neglectful, or, just everything's so dysregulated. And what looks good then is to grab everything you can. You're told the world is a dog-eat-dog world. And so then you grab, and you feel like you're competing all the time because you never feel quite right. And you have and then you've been taught the the stories about competition, that's what you have to do in life, and you feel so afraid all the time with triggers and everything because your heart is underdeveloped. And so that's where we are. We're in this kind of mess of dysregulation and then destruction at the same time of one another, ourselves, one another, and the planet.
Mm. Well, there seems like an opportunity with the pandemic being here. People are rethinking all sorts of ways of being that we just said were normal, and rethinking what is normal, because it doesn't look like we're going to be going back to that anyway. So I know that on the breakingthecyclefilm.org site, there is a film guide, discussion questions. There's a Spanish version of the film, and it also has been translated into 15 languages on subtitles and on the YouTube version. So this is we have tried to make it as easy for people to pick it up and go with it and hang on to the message, and also join Darcia in monthly discussion groups, live ones, to ask questions. So this is a really amazing tool, and it is based on your work. At the beginning of this, we'll show the pictures of you as this bicultural, bilingual child traveling the world, and to see the foundation that instilled in you this curiosity and also inspired you to come up with this amazing, helpful messaging and advocacy. Thank you so much, Darcia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've been told a story that we are selfish, aggressive, rugged individuals. But if that were true, we should have no problem with physical distancing and self-isolation. The pandemic showed us that this story is not who we are. That's because we evolved in cooperative bands of kin and non-kin, where we were nurtured and welcomed by all members of the community. We lived together, we gathered food together, we sang together, and we danced together. We knew it would have been impossible to survive on our own. But together, we thrived. Today, we are living in a culture that goes against everything it means to be human. Our culture emphasizes toughness over tenderness, isolation instead of togetherness, even for babies. As a result, we are depressed, anxious, chronically ill, and at the bottom of every international indicator for health. We are stuck in a cycle of competitive detachment where we feel disconnected from others and even ourselves, while at the same time feeling we have to compete for anything worthwhile. There's a way not only to break this cycle, but to create a new one that reclaims our humanity and helps us heal ourselves and our culture. We can create a cycle of connected, cooperative companionship. For most of our existence, we have created culture from the bottom up, from the way we raise children, and from the top down, from the stories we told one another. Children were nested in loving, supportive village care, growing deep connections to and respect for the natural world. In modern culture, children are raised with disconnection, with little concern for their basic needs, and with an almost random set of relational experiences. They still hear stories conveyed by various media, but they are full of put-downs, egoism, and violence. Babies require an external womb experience to grow and connect with others. They need calming, affectionate care, immediate responses to keep them optimally aroused while rapidly growing brain connections. Without this early care, without meeting our millions-year-old biological needs for our evolved nest, babies learn a pattern of disconnection from the self, from others, and from the world, manifesting in self-protective mindsets and irritation with people from different backgrounds or with different ideas. We withdraw from social life because it's just too painful, triggering the traumas we experienced early on in life. We constantly seek to fill a void we were never biologically intended to experience. The good news is that it's possible to break this cycle of competitive detachment and restore the cycles of connected, cooperative companionship. We can learn what our basic needs are and find ways to help everyone get them met. We can take steps that open our minds and hearts and build empathy towards others who are different from us. We can become aware and careful about where we put our greatest asset, our attention. We can build attachment to the natural world by immersing ourselves in its beauty and developing our connection with its aliveness. Cultures can and do change. It begins with each one of us realizing our inherent nature to be empathic, flexible, and sovereign beings, followed by taking steps to heal and restore our core nature. Many of us assume that the culture we live in mirrors innate human nature, but today's dominant cultures of competitive, destructive detachment are rare and recent. Nearly every other culture that has ever existed during our species' history over millions of years has been one of connected, cooperative companionship. To heal ourselves and our world, we simply must return to this way of nurturing children and communities. For more information, go to breakingthecyclefilm.org.